Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Church of Pentan podcast, the premier Battle Spirits talk show. May the cores be our saviors. I'm Espira, your head of ceremony, and as usual, I'm joined by my apostles, Cosmic and John. Cos, how are we doing this week?
Doing pretty good. It's a very short week, hopping between events, but excited to rest up a little bit and then get ready to cast this weekend.
True. And actually, on a very similar vein, John, how are you doing this week?
I am doing great. I just got done casting, so just now going to pass the baton over the cause. Who passed it to me before that, and we'll just go back and forth for a while. Maybe I don't know.
We'll see. See how it plays out. So actually, we can kind of jump into that. Our topics today will be pretty simple. Grand Open Atlanta. We all had very different experiences in terms of how that all went through. So we can talk about that. Then we'll jump into the Pro Tour, which is actually this coming weekend. Then we'll be touching what's that card art. And then from there, we'll be talking about BSSO4. There's been a couple of leaks, couple of spoilers, couple of things coming through. So we'll be having discussions around that, which is looking to be like a very cool set. For our visual watchers here, unfortunately, I did not bring my webcam with me as I'm currently chilling in Portland. So unfortunately, you'll have to enjoy my profile pic for now. But to kick it off, John, like you were saying, you had casted, and how'd you find it? I mean, I know you had talked about before how you had done some casting before, but now on this Battle Spirit side, how was it?
I loved it. It was a lot of fun. I got to really watch Battle Spirits played at pretty much every skill level, and it was really fun to really follow the plays, see how people play, just call the games. I felt like pretty great, synergy there with Emmy. It was a lot of fun to really break down the games with them, and from what I could tell from chat and just the Discord and Facebook, people seem to really like it. So that's all that I really care about is they all enjoyed it, and that makes me happy. But I had a really good time doing it, honestly.
Nice. So I've casted for a while now, and tell me, how frustrating is it watching people throw their match away?
Man, it was I always expect people to not play perfectly. I mean, that's silly to think that people are just going to play perfect, but you don't realize how many small mistakes add up and how many small mistakes people make until you have perfect information and watch the game. And it's like there were some people, and I mean, I'll just throw Cause under the bus because he's right here.
Fine.
But
I know you're going.
it's like you just want to grab him by the shoulders and shake him. It's like, why are you doing this? But it's infuriating, but at the same time, it's actually really cool to see that that nobody's perfect. And even watching like my own teammates play in the top cut, like Colin and Alex, it's like, I know you guys know these plays. Why are you doing this? And it's fun. It's cool. But yes, I mean, at the same time, like you mentioned, it is also just infuriating.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just goes to show that there is that level of pressure. It's
for sure.
It's something that goes untalked about enough, but it's just like when you go up against someone who's consistently a day 2 performer, right? There is that level of edge that they have because they can manage those, top cut, end of tournament Swiss nerves a lot better because they've been there before or they're just used to it. So it's something that you see time and time again. But to that sense, I mean, I think you guys also did a pretty good job in terms of diversifying the kinds of decks that you saw that day. I mean, that was a pretty cool tournament in terms of people bringing different things. Did you have a favorite kind of either moment or kind of deck and kind of how it played out during any of your rounds, or?
Not really. I mean, as far as the diversity goes, they, George and the stream team, first of all, they did a great job with production. I mean, that was really clean. But they kind of gave us free reign on just picking stream matches. They trusted us to make it entertaining, fill all the time that we had, try not to pick too many fast rounds. So I think we did a pretty good job with that. As far as decks we saw, round 1, I really enjoyed. I know that Jesse Smith, I think he only ended up on 5-3 or something, but his deck was really cool. So I was happy to see that. And then later in the event, I think it was the last round, we got to see Aaron Michael, who made Top Cut, in that red Colemane deck, which was a favorite of mine. I love that deck. I thought it was really cool to see. Kaz's deck I liked a lot. I think a lot of the decks that we saw were all really entertaining. Like we really tried to cut down on like here's red versus yellow like every
Right.
round.
Yeah.
And so I think we did great, with that, and try to make for an entertaining stream. But every round, I mean, I like the decks that we all featured, so it was fun.
Yeah, no, I think you guys did a really solid there. And actually, good point. I mean, yeah, we saw Kaz on stream. We saw him play some Golem tokens. Or no, wait, we didn't see him play Golem tokens because that's not the deck he played. But regardless, he still made day two.
No.
Actually, made 4th place in Swiss round. So even if we weren't even at a top cut, which causes like only way I'm getting into day 2 is if top cut. You still would have made top cut if it was top 8, buddy. So what you end up playing this weekend, dude?
Yeah, so I did the classic. It's the midnight before the event. I just want something else. I hate everything. So shout out to Andy. He gave me his list that he's been working on, and a lot of people were apparently giving him a hard time about. But it is the don't call it 5 color because of the flood stream in the sideboard, but 5 color Smagg. And this is a list that really came out of the Brisbane event. The Big Ticks boys, shout out to them for the list. But as we've been kind of taking this multicolored deck approach, going from K at the Pro Tour, which I played, now into Smagg, it really lends itself once you sit down to play it. On paper, it's, hey, here's a bunch of dumb ramp idiots. Here's your top end with Curse Combo and Elephant. Go from there, right? But Smagg actually lends itself very well to, one, obviously Beldegor, that's in the deck as well, and giving that stabilization. But when you start to look at the individual pieces of the deck itself, Dream Bomb, 2 white pips, Floodstream, 2 blue pips, Forest Guardian, 2 green pips, right? So when you have those Smaggs on board, actually it just smooths out everything else that you can do in the deck. So it is actually like the key enabler. Like, yes, at some games you just ramp a billion cores and it doesn't matter. But I found myself so many times where I was just like, wow, having 2 Smagg on the board is actually insane for what it allows this turn to then turn into. And I gotta say, my favorite play of the weekend, which I didn't even realize until I think it was round 2, because I was rereading the deck, because again, literally 0 games the night before. I just picked it up, played it on the whim, went 7-1. So thank you, Andy, for a good list. But Smagg Derm Dyna makes Smagg unblockable. So I was winning games with oh, by the way, here's 2 unblockable Smaggs and a Derm. Deal with this, because the deck plays no Nexus, but spoiler, your opponent always will. So it was just a fun list. It does play in that similar vein of K, where it's like, you just want to core starve your opponent, make sure that they can't get ahead, gum up the board as much as you can. K wants to do it with the Cheerios or the Elementals, right? The 0 cost, because you get them back that way. The Smagg deck is going to do with Forest Guardian, because being AK and tapping down their board is pretty insane, it turns out. And then they just naturally have to play into either your Curse combo or just aggroing them out with the Elephants, because a 10k attacker is still pretty good. So I love the list. I do think it needs to have some spell adjustments and sideboard adjustments, but it's like no one really knew what the field was going to be after this month-long break we had. But deck was legit. If I was playing the Pro Tour this weekend, I don't know how many cards I would actually change up to just throw a number at probably 10 at least, just because of what we saw this past weekend. A lot of aggro, Floodstream probably has to come main deck now, things of that nature. And then just some other sideboard considerations. And I gotta say, the vanilla was the worst card. And yes, I did play against yellow 3 different times, but my God, did I hate seeing that vanilla. And I honest to goodness believe you just take it out going forward. But we'll see. The list was a ton of fun, and I had a great time.
Yeah, your list, when I saw it, I thought it was a really good meta call, because the way that it kind of played out is Curse Dragon and Baculus, like the Curse combo right now, is actually back to being really pretty relevant again. We did see some all-in decks like the white aggro and the red aggro. But that being said, I think overall the Curse combo is really good against the red decks right now. It's really good against the yellow decks, obviously. It's very good against the white decks. It's just a good place to be. So, I don't know how many times you won games because you Curse comboed, but that is one of the best things you could be doing right now. And, I think that it was a really good call. Yeah, I'm glad that you did well, and you definitely deserve it. So well done.
Thank you. Nice to finally get the day 2, on the board, because this is my last event for the year. Because then again, it's Pro Tour, which I'm casting, and then World, which who knows what's going on. I honest to goodness do not know. I can't even give any spoilers of like, hey, look forward to whatever. Like, no idea what's going on with World. So may or may not be casting it. Stay tuned.
With the, you're talking about potentially like a 10-card sub out. Can I convince you to make 4 Smoggs within that 10-card cut, or is he staying in the deck?
No, I like, honest to goodness, like I was like memeing a little bit about like, oh, it's Smagg. Smagg's doing Smagg things, and I'm like, oh shit, no, he's actually like really important for this deck. And I think it also lends itself well to, once the card pool gets deeper, once we see some of those like hard splash cards where it's like you only get 2 pips, but then you have like the ramp for the other half of it. Smagg lends himself really well to that. So yeah. I'm curious to see where that ends up with the the double symbol cards that we have. But like even things like, you have a board of Beldegor, Smagg, something, and then it's like, oh, I can now cast this Black Lance for a lot cheaper. And that just felt, game winning at times. Smagg stays. You heard it here first.
Okay. And we don't care about Star Blast, right? Because like this deck has like 20 on summons.
Yeah, so the thing I learned very quickly is that yes, you are going, and like people, got to trigger Star Blast on me all bloody weekend. Like they paid the cost, they got to draw all the cards, but because the way the deck works that you core starve them until, turn 10 or like wherever it ends up being, like, cool, you got all those cards. You can't do shit all with them because I didn't give you extra cores and you're not a green deck. So yes, obviously the argument is like, oh, but they're going to see more ice shields and stuff like that. But there was matches where against like all my yellow decks I play against, like, oh, I went up to 9 life and, I just had all these different draw engines. And you go, okay, that's cool and all, but it's going to come a point where I just build my board, curse dragon you, and I'm going to check you and kill you in 2 turns if you don't have the ice shield. So it plays out very differently than I expected going into it.
Yeah, I think it's right. I think it almost kind of falls into that same idea of like when Purple pivoted to using Black Lands, and you realize like, yeah, you know what? I don't care that you're drawing cards because I'm just like consistently getting so much value from my unsummons that like, I think it almost comes down to a world where you kind of have to like, you're either playing the attrition game where you can't afford to give your opponent any cards, or you're just playing the value game and being like, my value, my top end is like just so much better that I don't care that you draw cards. Which, to be fair, when we're talking about things like the curse combo, like, yeah, I don't care if you have like, 5, 6, 7 cards on board. If you do that, I'm going to board wipe you. And if not, then I'm just going to elephant out tempo you at some point or another. So.
Yeah. No, that's right on point. And I think, speaking of the curse combo, that's really funny. I mentioned Kaz's throw earlier, and I think, I'm sure that you know by now, but it's probably because you were a little too anxious with that curse combo against Allende on stream. But
I don't know if people noticed it either, but like I couldn't fucking stand it. I don't know who they were, but someone kept walking around me, and that's why you kept like seeing me looking like this.
Oh, really?
Because there was a person that kept walking by the table, and like I didn't want to say anything because they were clearly like, I think they're one of the people running the stream. But for whenever it's on YouTube, you can go look at me like looking off to the side nonstop. So yeah, shout out to that. But it's I didn't realize there was face cameras on, so now I'm curious to go back and how many times I ended up looking over.
I didn't notice like the face cameras all day, because like the way that they had the stream set up like internally, like on our sides, like my camera was like up in the top left corner covering one, and the other one was over here. So like I didn't see it all day, but that's funny that you mentioned it. I'll have to go back and watch. But speaking of your feature match, I thought you played well. It sucks to lose the way you did. I mean, I don't know, spoiler alert for people, watching it later. Kaz lost in time due to double counter sword. So,
oh yeah, I forgot you told me about that.
Yeah, that was brutal. You were going to win 99 times out of 100, and it's just like the way that the game played out. Like his hand was just like ice shield, 2 counter swords, and I'm just like, as soon as I saw that, there was like maybe 2 minutes left in the round, and I'm like, Kaz is going to lose this game exactly like this, and it happened, and I felt sick. But
what was worse is my hand was like double Manticore flood.
It was crazy,
and I'm like, wow, I actually have like knowing he wants to stall out because he told me he went up to 60. We know him as a player. We know the end of the match shenanigans. It is what it is. And I'm like, wow, I actually have a game-winning hand here. I can get him low enough, and then the flood stream protects me. And then he actually had the exhaust nexus exactly as well. I'm like, I'm sorry. So your perfect hand was exactly Exhaust Nexus, double counter sword, absolute ice shield. He
It was
did not mulligan,
crazy.
if I remember correctly. I'm like,
Yeah.
what? What is this like that he kept on it, right? And he still had Ervitat and whatever the other 2-drop was, Freezetol. At the time, I'm like, bro, you just had the God 7 opener. Like, I can't do anything here.
Yeah. So, speaking of your matches, your top 8 match was against Rex, right?
Or 16, but yes.
Oh yeah. Top 16, and you of course you lost. Was it 2-1? Was that?
No, it was a heartbreaker. So game 1, God, it was like double Curse Dragon, irrelevant top end card, something. I'm like, all right, I got a mulligan, I guess. Like, I can't just do nothing into his deck for the first 3 turns. Spoiler, I mulligan, do nothing for the first 3 turns because like
Yes.
I just hit all 6 and I'm like, all right, well, game 1 is pretty miserable anyways. Like, you got it is what it is, lost it. Going to game 2. Actually got to set up a really sick, like very aggressive early opener, had double Smagg into Derm Dyna, pushed him to 1, and he went in the tank on it and found like storm. It was like strong draw into exactly what he needed to Derm Dyna and 2 attackers, and just Derm Dyna me back before I could do anything. And the problem is I made a mistake early on because I set the wrong card in my burst because I was trying to activate Smagg, and I had Absolute Ice Shield, Dream Bomb, and Star Blast. So I ended up just burning an Absolute Ice Shield and then didn't see another one in the next like 15 cards or whatever it ended up being, or 10 cards probably because it was not that many turns later, but I did draw. So part misplay, but also if I would have kept the Ice Shield, there was a turn where he was Elven aggroing me out, so then I wouldn't have had the Dream Bomb to bounce the Elephant, which would then have let me get the 1, get him down to 1 to set up the Derm Dyna play. So I think I was like losing it either way, but to like set the wrong card, then mill the Ice Shield, and I'm like, all right, probably should have like got rid of the Star Blast, I think is what it was instead.
Yeah.
But I'm like, all right, I just wanted to play the Smagg, and it's so interesting because when we were playing in Swiss, he milled me out. So like in the back of my mind, I was like, okay, well, I don't want to draw too much because he's just going to mill me out, but then I need to draw a card so I can still find like my Absolute Ice Shield and stuff. So it's this weird game where like you have to constantly remember how many cards you have left in deck and then go, okay, is this 2 Mandela? How many Star Blast can I play before I'm in the 2 Mandela range? And I just like blanked. I didn't look at the sideboard between games either to like remind myself of the Derm Dyna. So I literally just forgot about Derm Dyna as well. So this is 100% on me, just like super inexperienced with day 2 and Battle Spirits side of things, where it's like I didn't study and prepare properly for that match. But I will say, out of all the games that I played that weekend, it was my favorite match. And it's like one thing I want to like play again, just like go through the matchup, because both decks have so many different angles that you can attack through, where it's not just like, oh, yellow has Genbu, then you have unblockable, right? Like both my deck and his deck have alternate ways or alternate paths to victory that aren't just like, here's my key, spirit win. So shout out to those guys. What was it called? The Mondongo list or whatever.
Yeah.
Mandela Dingo list. Super sick. I love that list. Obviously, they withheld my husband from me. I'm a little bit upset about that, but it's all good. At the end of the day, we still got the top 16, walked away with a little bit of money.
So,
and,
so do you think so you mentioned that you got milled out 1 game or 2 or whatever. Do you ever consider at that point, say you get milled out game 1, do you ever just like think about jamming all 10 cards from your sideboard right into your deck?
I did 6, I think is what it was.
Okay.
Because as I was like studying his list, I realized that because they're so spirit light, Floodstream, where you would in other games never want to bring it in against like white control traditionally, because of the other removal packages and stuff we had, like Floodstream was a very good card, and it almost won me game 2 because I Floodstreamed his Sheriff Eagle. So it's one of those things where you're bringing in a couple extra cards, like, okay, I want to protect against my first Star Blast, and like that writes out, right? Where at the same time as I at least want to see one of these Floodstreams, so it's going to be important. And if he mills 1, it's whatever. So there's a couple cards like that. So it was like what the third 3 Derm Dyna, the Dream Bomb, and 3 Floodstream, so 7. And I took out like 1 Beldegor because there was 3 originally and something. I forget what it was, but like the rest of it was just playable good stuff to how to navigate that matchup. So maybe I should have brought in all of them, but then that's like, then I have Sheriff Eagles, and that's awkward in that matchup in particular. Where I need to be more aggressive. So
I mean, I was just curious, like what the line is there or game plan is if you have a slower, deck versus like a mill deck. It's like you just like, screw it, just jam all 10 in, or you keep 50. But so that was just an interesting thought. But you made top 16. George, how was your event?
Well, you see, I didn't go to the tournament, so
Yeah. Got stuck at home on missed the flight. Yeah,
Yeah. No, unfortunately, it was a very tough tournament for me. This was actually out of the last 4 tournaments I've been to, this was the 3rd tournament where my round 1 is a team. So
I did see that. Yeah.
I've been testing with
Ridiculous.
Anthony for the past few weeks now. Anthony, Caleb, and the boys. And last minute, I decided to pivot off of the Mandango list. Not that I didn't like it, but I kind of landed on like this blue-red list that I really enjoyed. And I'm like, okay, well, if the logic we're going into this is that we're trying to hedge against red and yellow, well then there's some very neat and specific cards within the red and blue shell that can really kind of punish that, right? So it's like if you look at King Randolph is either like the worst card in the game or like one of the best cards in the game. And right now, there are so many decks that are pushing so many 3s to kind of prevent a 2-for-1 from flood that it actually like constantly in testing. I'm hitting 2-for-1s, I'm hitting 3-for-1s because people are like, Dino, Eagle, or whatever, or just kind of like any kind of variation on that, Hippo with a couple of other bodies. And that's what and at first it started off as a mono blue list, and then it kind of converged into this red blue list where I'm like, okay, well, we can run if we're Camellia Whip's really good in that kind of a list, and if we're already on Camellia Whip plus a Block Golem, a Whirlpool sometimes, not often, but sometimes you can just like have a 20k Chameleon and then they actually can't attack that turn, Apollo is really good because if Randolph and all the blue cards like Flood and so on are taking care of their 5 or less, Apollo is what allows you to be able to get like out a Andromeda or anything beyond. And then at the very top end, it's like, okay, well then how do we deal with Genbus, and then how do we deal with King Dragnos? And like, okay, Allegro, right? And like it just the blue-red list kind of, I honestly, as bad before, I ended up going 1-4 drop. And to be honest, a part of that is kind of the Swiss roulette. I didn't play any of the matchups I wanted to. I played against 2 white. The only matchup that I ended up taking was against Snakes, and then otherwise I played against like essentially 2 white control lists. And then like a Nova list. So it's just like a bunch of 6-drop pluses, which like I can't really deal with that until I get a Allegro out.
Yeah.
So it's just like, unfortunately, I didn't see the matchups I wanted to, but nevertheless, I still like the notion of the deck because it kind of hits like every point of the game where it's like early, if they turbo out 3 drops, you can actually get King Randolph out on 2 guaranteed, going second. Or if they hit you once, you can get out, or if they hit you on their turn 1, you can get on your turn 2, which is like a pretty big tempo swing if they decide to do that. So the deck is pretty sweet. I think it plays really well. It plays some of the best red cards, plus you play just the good blue cards. And you actually get reductions on your things like your floods and stuff like that, which means you're able to go wider. And it turns out you don't need that many mill pieces. I think at the end I ended up with like 8 cards that specifically have Crush, and then 2 Sabitos, which Sabito did a ton of work this tournament. Like it is insane how much value you can get from that. So, I think when you're within the 10 cards that are able to force your opponent to have to mill, plus you have like so many decks like are Canyon decks, so they're just pitching yourself. So, over the span of like 3-4 turns, they kind of get there themselves. So I like the deck. Surprisingly, when I ran it, a lot of people, like I heard Blandon tell me that he had considered running it. I know Emmy had mentioned that it was something that he was potentially looking at, stuff like that. So it's nice to know that I was kind of in the same ballpark, and I like the cards a lot. So it's kind of tough to kind of walk into that and being like, was my deck choice wrong? Did I just? But 100% I was on tilt. By the time I was done with round 1, I was just such in a headspace of like, bro, I'm cursed.
Yeah,
that is
rough.
just. Yeah, so it's because it was Anthony specifically for 2 tournaments, and then Cause for the Pro Tour.
Cause, yeah.
And
Dude, that's so crazy,
Look,
man.
I'm not
because
playing the Pro Tour. It's okay. We're gonna get there, guys.
I thought I was a teammate magnet. Like I play like Valentino or someone from our team like every event, but like you're just like round 1 or right off the rip like every event, and it's crazy. I
yeah,
don't know how it
that's the
keeps
thing.
happening.
I wouldn't even care that much because it's bound to happen, right? I just hate that it's round 1 every goddamn time.
So, yeah, that's the worst.
Rex and I are lucky on the other side.
Yeah, because
in the last round of Swiss,
no matter what, it's like you're feeling bad, right? Because if you win, you're pissed because now one of your boys is 0-1, and if you lose, you're pissed because you're 0-1. It's like that's just the worst feeling, and I feel bad. And
yeah,
I saw that pairing, and I just shook my head.
Yeah, and it's and then even like some of the guys knew that like it was bad for me, but didn't realize that it was round 1 every single time it happens. It's like, yeah, and it doesn't help that like I tend to have a tendency to do the like play a different deck day of the event than we were kind of all practicing, and it always lines up really badly. So like, I helped push Cause towards the K deck, which was meant to beat red, and I was playing red, so that was sick. That was very cool.
Yeah.
They're playing the white go big, don't care what you do deck, and like my deck just does not do anything against go big decks. So it's this unfortunate position where I'm just kind of lining up for a really bad round one. But hopefully, that's just getting out of the way so I don't face anybody at the Pro Tour.
Yeah,
But
and at Worlds, right? Yeah.
I know Worlds, yeah. But like I made a realization in like round 3 or round 4. I sit down for my round and I look to my left, don't see anybody I know. Turn to the right, don't see anybody I know. And then I'm like, oh, this is how you know you're in the gulag. When you look around you and there isn't a single name you can recognize.
Yeah. We call that the Shadow Realm. That's
yeah,
when
that's
that was me at
The man was gone.
Tulsa. I was in the Shadow Realm at Tulsa, and it was like you said, that's when you go look to your left to say hi to your boy, or look to your right to see how your friend's doing, and like all of a sudden it's just like people that are at their first event ever, or someone who learned a game 2 weeks ago, and you're just like, okay, not having a good day.
Dude, I'm telling you. So I'm 1-3 at this point, right? I feel deflated. I'm like, great. Now I'm just playing for top 32. I'm playing for $200. And like, don't get me wrong, $200 is, much better than nothing. But at that point, I'm so deflated. And then I sit down, and then my opponent comes and sit down, and he's like, do you think we Star Dragon players read our cards? And then I'm like, God damn it, I'm about to fucking lose. The moment that happened, I'm like, I'm about to take an L to this.
Yep.
Oh,
Man, I've been there, man.
That too.
So, sometimes you just lose the Swiss roulette, and that was like me in Tulsa, dude. Like every round, it's like, all right, I hope I play against this deck, and every round, it's like play against the exact opposite. And you're just like, it's like, all right, this is how it's going. But yeah, I mean that sucks. But you mentioned you played against some white control decks, and that's a pretty good segue into like the prevalence of white at this event. Like white at this event had an insane conversion rate. Like there wasn't that many white, and like I think there was probably 6 or 7 in the top 16. And that was a pretty big surprise for me, especially like the all in set 2 decks that we saw with like the ducks and the swans and stuff. There were 2 of them in the top 16. And that was crazy to me. Like, what do you guys think about that?
I think it goes all the way back to when reveals were coming out. And we talked a lot about Floodstream, right? And Floodstream is going to be the check for the meta. And as we saw in the last couple of Grand Open events, people either had one or like one main or none, and possibly none in the sideboard as well. And it's something we've talked about for quite a while. So part of me is not surprised to see it. Again, I think red aggro is kind of like the big surprise for a lot of us, but it follows that same mentality where it's like you just have a lot of cheap spirits. And, again, shout out to the red aggro deck because you have Camellia Whip plus Power Boost, which is like the deck doesn't have Ice Shield, but it kind of does actually have Ice Shield in that way.
Yeah.
And the Dragno Guard tech was super spicy, but Power Boost has just been a fun a card I've really liked, and it was really cool to see a deck utilize that. But I think this lends us to, okay, we had this big event, second largest Grand Open ever. Aggro was everywhere, and I have to imagine, as I mentioned, a few moments ago, Floodstream has to come back. It just has to for the Pro Tour.
I think there's something to say also that like everyone's saying like, oh, aggro's bad because we have flood and this and that. And while I think a lot of that is true, especially just Camellia Whip like exists already something aggro. But I think there's something to say that like you need to see it. And sometimes aggro decks are just gonna get there, right? Like we saw Anthony get skewered on stream against white aggro. But like both games he was in a position where like he actually just needed one defensive spell to get there, right? Game 2, he brought in 4 floods. He just needed to see flood literally one time. And then in game 1, he almost completely stabilized. He just needed an Infinity Shield. Like one Infinity Shield, and he was completely set, right? But aggro doesn't give you the time. And I think that's the thing that, like, unfortunately, you can take in for it. But a pilot that's running hot on aggro is very hard to beat for because, maybe one just doesn't outs. And I think, like we said, we're in a position where it's so iffy blood because it's like everyone's running 3s, so it's still good, but it never really for 1. So how many do you include? So it's very interesting to kind of decide on how much you respect aggro because, like John was saying, we're seeing white take a huge dominance now. White control just finished second place. It shout outs to C because it also placed well in Liverpool. So now it's just like how much you respect white, and the more that we respect aggro, the better white does. Because flood, outside of getting rid of a couple of eagles, depending on if they're on it, absolutely nothing, right? So it's
Yeah.
interesting, especially as like you're saying, curse dragon, very well positioned. The better white aggro, or the better that white does, but at the same time, that makes Nomen Guard better. So it's maybe we're just kind of rotating around, and that's just kind of the world that we're looking at going into.
Yeah. No, I mean, I totally agree. And like the whole you touched on that red deck, that the whole power boost thing with the whip. That's something that I didn't see right away. And then the more that I looked at his deck list, I was like, wow, this is actually crazy. Like, I never even thought about that. And to play that card defensively, like I I felt like that deck was crazy. And even if you get flood streamed, it's like you have Colemane. I think he only had two Colemanes. I might have maybe wanted to see a third, but you have Colemane to be like, okay, you flood stream me, but now I'm just drawing 3 cards a turn. And it's, how do you come back from that? And I was glad to see him in the top cut. I know that he lost in the top 8 to Matt, who got second overall. But that deck was cool. So for me, some people's story out of this event might be, hey, purple won, it's tier 1, whatever. But for me, I think the biggest story is the dominance of white more than anything else. That was really unexpected. And then I think that red deck was kind of unexpected too. And I think if someone tweaks that just a little bit, that deck is actually, I think, super terrifying for the Pro Tour and even moving into Worlds, just because it has answers to all the anti-aggro stuff. So we'll have to see how the meta really pans out.
Yeah. To that end, right control, John, bomb or no bomb?
You have to play bomb somewhere. And I mean, I know that I talked to Matt about this too in a Discord, but like it was insane to me that bomb wasn't in that 60 card somewhere. I'm not hating on not playing at main. Like that's a meta call, fine. Like it worked. But to not have it in your side at all, that's like, bruh, like you got to find room for that just as a catch-all. You can argue that the avalanches are better in some spots, but like you're never going to convince me that no dream bomb white is correct.
Yeah, I think it's the notion that it's a catch-all, right? Like,
Hmm.
like
Yep.
it's the fact that you're in color for an oh shit button, and that is
Yeah.
very hard for me to like completely cut off the table. There are some places in which like fine, maybe you side them, but to say no altogether, I feel like is you know very like expecting very specific matchups throughout your entire tournament.
Yeah. No, like I said, like I'm not hating on him for not playing at main, like, whatever. I don't think I would do that, but hey, it worked for him. But still, like, my biggest gripe was just like, bro, that's not even in your deck at all. And it's like, as you saw in the finals, like, no matter how hard Tom tried to throw, like Matt just didn't have any answers for, the Maduke. If Matt just has one answer, then I think he wins.
Right.
So, it's that's how it worked out. Of course, Matt did very well, got second place. It's hard to complain about that. But yeah, but there was what, 2 white controlled action at the top 4, and then what, 1 red and 1 purple. So I think that's pretty expected for what the breakdown was. So that was a pretty solid top 4. I think even the top 8 was pretty accurate, based on the total meta breakdown for the event. The only thing that was kind of a surprise is that there was only one green deck out of like 25 or 27 green decks being played. There was only one of them that made top 16. So
And I think that's like probably the second biggest story is the underperformance both green and yellow,
green
right?
and
And it's
yellow,
just like
yeah.
so first we can talk about green, and I think it's just at this point people have come to, and I don't even think it's wrong, but like we're at a point now where you can maybe like happily like disrespect Green Gale, and like it actually turns out that it's fine. Red can incidentally slow it down by just killing his next best. Everyone's running Dream Bomb anyway, so you can stall off the Fang. for longer, and then turns out that if you just kill green, they don't have that many great defensive options until you give them so long that they're set up, and then they're. I think part of that also might be that some people are kind of straying away from like the Beldegor scope package, which gave them that like really strong defense, but you kind of deal with Cause a little bit better. But that's that one, and especially yellow, because like Cause said, decks are running vanillas just to deal with yellow. Do we even need to bother? I'm not even sure we need to anymore, right?
Yeah.
But then the question is like, why? Genbu's still actually insane, and the yellow can just draw 5-6 cards a turn depending if everything's going right. So why isn't yellow? I don't know if you guys ended up having yellow on stream and it kind of gave indication of that, or
we had a couple yellow, but like by the time we got to the later rounds, all the yellows were getting pounded, so we didn't even find a yellow towards the top to even feature. But that was the problem with green too. People kept asking like, "Hey, can you feature Gale?" I'm like, "Bro, I can't. Like, there aren't any." But it's like I think the main issue with yellow right now is that all these other decks in the format are evolving. Like white's evolving, like red's even evolving. The yellow's just not, right? It's the same
They
list as
can't.
it was like it's the same list as it was like a month ago. And so all these other decks are like 8 to 10 cards different to mold into what the meta's doing. And yellow's like, hey, I can't do anything. I'm still the same deck. And it's like that's huge. Like I think yellow can evolve to a certain extent. Like you could play more like flagellums in your deck. Like that would help a lot. But everyone's just like, nah, just playing 8 blast 4 Genbu, let's go. And like I just don't think you can. So for me, it's like the big winners of this event are like obviously white decks, purple is a big winner. I still don't think purple is anywhere near tier 1, but it did show that it is a playable deck.
It only has the most finalist placings out of all other colors we've seen, but
Stop.
no big deal.
Stop.
I'm just saying that 3 final appearances by purple,
Stop.
no other color.
So big winners is like white
Coleman
control.
has a 100% version right
Yeah.
now.
Hey
Like,
man, we
Purple, I
sleeping on
guess.
Coleman. People are gonna be getting the cold train here pretty soon.
Biggest losers is obviously yellow and Gale. And then red. I don't think red's a winner or a loser from this event. I think it finished exactly where it should have. I mean,
I agree.
there was it was the most played deck. It had pretty much the most top cut finishes. I think. White actually had 6. I think red only had 5. But if you go down to top 32, I think there was even more red. Red was all over the top tables when we were trying to find features. So, red, I don't want to call it a winner or a loser because I think it did exactly what people thought it was going to do. But, yellow and green, terrible. And then, of course, white, stocks way up.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see. I think I saw some yellow players try like Guard Enterprise to just try to hedge against like bad matchups, but it almost feels like again you're evolving in a way to try to like prevent your like already auto lose matchups in a way that I don't even matters, because like to get to Enterprise and Guard you need to yellow stuff anyways, and like let's say you're trying to go up against red prevents you from actually doing it. Does it really matter? I don't know. So it's kind of tough to tell, and just as we pivot towards talking towards the Pro Tour, kind of like what people are going to take. And to be fair, I think the tight timelines make it so that not a lot of people are gonna have that time to pivot, right? Like anyone who got their invite at Atlanta or like is just like or took a deck to Atlanta, odds are for a lot of players who maybe don't have testing teams or they don't have like every deck under the sun because they don't have a master playset or whatever, realistically they're going to be taking the same thing. So there's going to be that very interesting view probably that the Pro Tour is going to be a large percentage of players kind of having run the same thing as they did at Atlanta, or just kind of run the same thing they're going to run anyway because not that enough time between events to kind of pivot to something new. Then you have this pocket of like maybe 20 or so players who are on dedicated teams, are testing, try to change it. So it'll be very interesting to see kind of how the pivots happen, if any, going into the Pro Tour. Now that we have a better purview that like, white's pretty legit. Now it's like, okay, now we have to consider, how do we deal with Guard, Enterprise, et cetera.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Because my group, for example, I think they were pretty set on what to play for the Pro Tour, and it's different from what they played in Atlanta. But after you see these results in Atlanta, it's like, Well, I mean, oh shit, now there's a lot more white than we expected. So it's like, now what do we do? Right. So, um, I think white might be the most played deck at the Pro Tour now. Um, maybe that's kind of overreacting to Atlanta, but I mean, it has been trending that way for a few events now. It's been having an insane conversion rate. It's being built like 5 different ways. So it's not just one build. So
So are you
I
talking about purple or white? I'm not actually sure because that actually tracks for purple. Yes, yeah.
I would be willing to bet that purple won't even make a top 8 at the Pro Tour.
Damn.
Woo!
But
Damn.
yeah, I mean, I think white is definitely on the up. So I don't know. That's my bet that white will be very prevalent and have very, very good results at the Pro Tour. I don't even know what version of white because there's so many of them, but like I think that'll do the best.
Well, yeah, it's
To
funny, right?
John,
It's just go ahead.
I'll say to John's point as well, memes aside, I think the biggest thing that, looking at, because I actually went through, did all the meta analysis. If you saw on Twitter, I did the whole like, hey, what's every archetype for set 3? It's been super interesting to see that we've had 3 very distinctly different pivot points in this meta so far. And it's clearly not done. I would not be surprised at all if we take like Atlanta plus Pro Tour again. They're just too close, kind of being that their own turning point. And then by the time Worlds comes around, because we'll have even more time to test. People might finally have like TP promos and stuff. I would not be shocked at all if we see another, not huge shakeup, at least see some other decks make an appearance in Worlds as well. So it's been a really fun format to see how far we've come in a relatively short time and still have a little bit more to go.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I think we're in a position now where it actually might be the worst possible position to be a mid range, right? And in the sense that like you're now in a place in the meta where the go big white decks are doing really well, which also incentivizes the aggro decks to come out to kind of like punish people for going into those decks. Unfortunately, now as a mid range deck, you're stuck there. Which like don't get me wrong, as the mid range deck, you're in a good position to have answers for both because you can kind of balance between the two. But it's like where do I tech more against, right? Do I keep my cards that do absolutely nothing against the go big decks, or do I keep my cards that'll never get to play because I'm being aggroed out? So it's this weird position. It's like, what is the solution to kind of be, deal with both? And then where do you go from there? And I think, blue red does that really, really well, but I'm not going to go behind blue red at all at this point, as much as I think it's good. I think it's going to be very interesting to see if anyone finds a solution for that because we are 4 days away
Yeah.
from the Pro Tour, which I think doesn't give a lot of people answers, but does set the stage for Worlds. Right? These are things to think about for Worlds. There's an argument to be made that fortunately the Pro Tour might not have given people enough time, but who knows what ends up at the top 8? Then that's gonna be ban list aside, which I don't think any of us expect them to do that unless for some reason they change things up. Worlds will very much just be like, okay, this is what the last thing we saw, and now here's the month coming down for Worlds, and how players can manage from there and kind of what goes.
Yeah, dude, like red players are in shambles right now because like it like I still think it's a very, very good deck, maybe still the best deck, but like with all these white decks popping up now, like you can handle the white like aggro stuff and the white mid range stuff, but these white control decks, that's like your worst nightmare. And if those are very popular at the Pro Tour, like I would expect, like you just can't play red, right? Because you can't win the event, unless you get really lucky and win the Swiss lottery. But like I don't, that's just like the odds are stacked against you. So we'll have to see what happens with the Pro Tour here in just a few days, but I would be very surprised if Red won. And I think this is the first event in the history of Battle Spirits where I'm going against Red. Like I just don't see it happening for this one.
I will say, I think it goes back to Brad's list, maybe that had like charge draws for the plus 2K.
Yeah.
And then you have like Apollo who can suddenly hit 10, and then like you're 2-for-1ing white, but then you're giving the elephant triggers. But at the end of the day, white is pretty spirit light, all things considered, because you want to be so defensive with your infinity shields and suppressions that there is just a removal out there at some capacity.
True.
But
Yeah.
can red punch back and forth enough to get through that wall still and giving them multiple elephant triggers? I'm not sure, but I wouldn't be surprised if someone tries it and relies on either Charge Draw, my meme favorite again, Ruby Radiance, or any of the other plus 2Ks to give you that last little boost you need.
Yeah. That's a good point. I mean, because speaking of red, like in Atlanta, there was 5 red decks in the top cut, but 3 of them were Alex, Daniel, and Colin. So those players are just going to always overperform, kind of regardless. But if you take them out, maybe red's conversion it isn't as good anymore. So that's something to consider as well for the Pro Tour. I just, we'll see. My prediction is that white control will win. How do you counter that? Maybe you play a deck like Causes with the Curse Dragon stuff. I don't think straight purple is the answer. I think you just kind of play some sort of 3 color control deck with Curse Dragon or something. So I'm just interested what people are going to play. Even Coliseum Golem. I mean, I know it's a meme. Like we can meme on it some, but that card's actually probably pretty good if the meta is just a bunch of white control. So that's always something
dumping out a bunch of free 10Ks
as well.
Free ADs.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I think it leads itself to a lot of different things. Look at, especially since it's we'll see, and I'm excited to see you casted Cause alongside the Magic Arcanum guys. I think they're going to do a great job, especially since you guys are kind of a little bit on the lore, and hopefully we kind of see a couple things, keep everything exciting. So we'll kind of see how that goes. So in that same realm of talking about the guys who know the lore and stuff, we do actually have some BSS 04 leagues. So before we jump into that, though, we'll do what's that card art. This time around, I'm a little bit nicer to you guys. I pulled something decently meta, but again, it's referred to as we only talk about part of the name. So let's get it. This time around, I believe it's John's turn to go first, which may be to his advantage here. So you shall see again to our listeners. I show them the art of a card and any side properties that they may want, and then based on that, our apostles here guess the card that we are showcasing. So,
I know it's Black Screen of Death.
Yeah, this because I'm on a solo monitor now. I decided to fade it out before. Now I'm actually able to showcase it. So change that into fade. Come through. There we go. So John,
man,
what is
Curse
this
Dragon?
That's, I mean, you're.
Okay, so
gosh darn it.
God, we're both probably going to get so much shit for this, but for those who are listening and not watching, it's Curse Dragon. So there's your spoiler. But however, the full name is is it Imperial something? No, Infernal something Curse Dragon. Dread Infernal.
So
I think I know it, but I'm gonna let's see what his guess is.
Let's John cook.
Yeah.
Which is worse because I literally played this all weekend, casted it for 9 rounds, and not 100% sure I know the name.
Oh man, it's so funny because of course I did casting for the event and 4 people played it. Infernal King Curse Dragon.
God damn it.
Is that what you're going with?
Yes.
It is.
Final answer.
Infernal King Curse Dragon.
Yes. Finally got one.
Boo.
But it just goes to show such an iconic card like this, and we're still sitting here being like, hold up.
Yeah. It's like hold on. I think we can get there.
So good to know that I'll be able to continue reaching out into other cards and maybe still catch you guys on the updrift there. But actually, you
almost did.
Almost.
No, I'm saying you almost got me.
So in the same vein, Curse Dragon pivoting onto kind of the BSS04 stuff, we know that Nova is slated to come back in BSS04 in some way, shape, or form. And if you read the lore, it's actually by using the bits of the Era Void Lord, which actually gives us a showcase. Stores have gotten or will be getting a magazine shortly showcasing and talking about BSS. There's whole articles and stuff like that. And in that, we actually got our first looks into kind of some pieces of art here. So we have this like Nova fused with Era, and this thing looks sick. Like I,
Yeah.
it, you know, not the biggest lore guy, but I try to keep up with it, and just seeing this already has me pretty jazzed for what we're going to see, especially when we know like double symbols are coming. Like this is super cool. And when you blend that in with like the Eva stuff, where we know we're going to get like core cards that are thematic to Evangelion as well, I think Set 4 is probably lining up to be a pretty banger.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny because, like, I think the three of us, we kind of fall on all different ends of the spectrum as far as lore goes, right? Like, I couldn't care less about lore. You can't ever, like, even convince me to care. And, like, Cause is like, all right, lore's pretty cool. And then George is just like, you know, lore is cool sometimes, but, who cares? And it's just like, it's just so funny how that works out. But we can all agree that this art is insane. Like it's like here's Nova's top half, here's his bottom half, and it's fused together by like the soul core or whatever. Like that's super cool. So
Yeah, so I think
So
it's looking really good. And then I guess cause you probably have the best background info in terms of like
yeah, I was gonna say, just let me rant for a second here,
go
really,
for it.
really quick. So, what's super interesting about this is on the cover of the magazine, we also got the name. So the full name is Rage Star Dragon Siegworm Ira. So what's super interesting about this is that it is literally not Nova, but we know that Nova is coming back during sometime in set 4 due to the distributor information. In set 3 lore, we know that Tokiwa's main mission was to revive Nova to be one of the 4 sages to basically lead the new realm as they were falling apart through the Star Heaven Crane and the aquatic invasion, all that stuff. So what this really does beg the question is we know that they were having to go to the realm of gloom to resurrect Nova using the body of Era, the first Void Lord defeated, and the soul of Nova was being carried along through the realm of forest denizens, as it were. I forgot who had his brother had the soul, right? The meteor worm, if I remember correctly. So this begs a question of what the hell happened during the ritual, because something went terribly wrong to have this be the outcome of it. And we did see one of the flavor text of the cards that were previewed as well, that now this, again, Ira being rage, this Seaworm is now filled with so much rage that the Star Dragons have to keep it in line. So this is very much like the, hey, we have to revive the hero and oopsies, we made the villain. But again, where did Nova's soul go? Like, where is the other part of Nova in all of this? So, of course, that will be revealed in the cards themselves as the lore story goes on. But again, to see like Ira's center core of it and like the tearing apart and the rebuilding of the flesh, and you can actually see like the muscular tissues on the card art is just sick. So I'm really curious to see what this ends up doing. We know that it is going to be a high cost to descend spirit, but that's it. So we'll have to look forward to more spoilers soon. TM about it.
so my favorite part about all of that just now is just you reading the lore in that deep voice. And I just want more of it. Just keep reading lore to me. But that yeah, but this art is sick, like you said. I love it, But
Mm.
I think once this magazine comes out, like, isn't it on the cover? I don't know if we have like a spoiler of the cover or not, but like I think we can kind of see this card's cost from the cover as well, but it's so small. I don't know. Someone would have to like really enhance it.
I had a friend take like it was a 400 megabyte file that he sent me, like the highest scan possible that he
Mhm.
could, and the booster pack is just so perfectly covering what number it was.
Is it? Okay.
You can only see 5 of the 6 reduction, so it's cutting off the 6th reduction plus the cost. But
Yeah.
the level 1 for 1 core is 5k, which if I remember red math, that means it's at minimum a 7 drop. So I assume it's another 8 drop.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, that's cool though.
Yeah. So we're getting more of that. I think it's also very on theme. Like, we're gonna get Ava alt arts. Inevitably, this card is probably gonna get an Ava alt art, and it's very, like the same body and all that. Whether they go with the Angels route or whatever they go, really, really cool. Um,
Yeah.
I'm down. I mean,
Yeah. And
there's something to say about not having enough waifus in our game, but if our game keeps looking cool like this, which hey, I mean, based on SPR art and Pro Tour art, the game's capable of dishing out some really cool cards.
yeah. And then finally, after 4 sets, spoiler alert, we're getting new promo core cards. Well, not promo per se, but just different core cards
Hmm.
with the Eva stuff. So that's pretty cool too.
Yeah.
And shout out to the purple cores in set one, and the first collab set that will be launching in June with the starters. So very excited for new custom cores as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really cool.
I have to pat my own back. I think I am this close from getting cost use core cards. So for those who didn't know, at Atlanta, in round 6 onwards,
Nice.
Well,
unfortunately, we're at an atrium, which was like super sick. Honestly, one of the nicest venues I've ever played card games in. But there was by the time we got to 6 o'clock, it got dark, and unfortunately, the lights that were meant to be bright and were lit up weren't LEDs. They were like these kind of dim lights. So like everyone was playing at a candlelight dinner, and like now, Kaz can barely see his cores in the playmat, and I'm telling him, I'm like, Kaz, I can give you core cards if it's more visible. You don't have to worry about it. You can't see
Not
your blue
happening.
cores on your blue playmat. So just
Yeah.
one more tick on the box for core card supremacy.
Core cards are they're inferior or superior. Definitely not inferior. They're
You
the way
might
to
get
go.
me when we finally have the Eva stuff. That's when I might swap.
I switched to core cards for I think of the first Pro Tour was the first time I used them, and I have not looked back since. It's just they're just so much cleaner to use.
Hmm. And the players who tell me, because they're like, oh, why don't you like cores? Aside from the fact that they fall down, because that never happens, and like the amount of walking around and watching people pick up cores I do mid round, that's cap. Y'all don't pay enough attention
Yeah.
to the things
Look,
the way you guys
I
code.
will tell you right now, just straight face, that if every person on stream used core cards instead of the cores, there wouldn't have been any of the issues that popped up. Because there were like
True.
I think there were like 2 or 3 different issues. Like one time, I think Tom, the winner, underpaid for Maduke. It would have been so much easier to see with core cards. And Stephen Brown, I think on 2 different occasions, was making some errors with cores. And again, would have been completely clear with core cards. So, like, I think that we should just, make a motion that people should just use core cards and call it a day.
For the betterment of the game, what do you think, Kaz?
Yep.
No. Like I said, you might get me at set 4, but not before.
Yeah.
All right. So with that said, lots of excitement leading into the end of the week as we lead to the Pro Tour. This time around, John, I think you're going to be taking a chillax back until Worlds now, I think is my understanding of kind of how involved you're going to get.
Yeah, I'm going to play. Well, I am playing, but I'm not going to play at an event until Worlds. So I will be a spectator watching the stream and riling up Twitch chat for all of the Pro Tour.
Yeah.
Yippee.
Yeah.
Give me a hard
Pause
time.
on his toes.
And to that end, we'll have Cause over casting there, so give him your energy, guys, and make sure to keep up on socials for any announcements and whatnot that may come through along that side. And I myself will be playing, hopefully, to a performance that is slightly better than my Atlanta Grand Open. So, with that said, everybody, that is another week on the Church of Pentan podcast. May the cores be our saviors, and catch you guys